Welcome, everybody. Happy Monday. This is our 100th episode of Let's Do Lunch. Very pleased to say. And we have a terrific show today. Our future of our business of streaming show is always on Monday. Before we get to our speakers today, let me invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat. There we go. There's Digital Media Wire telling you exactly how to do it. When you go to the chat, please select the drop down for all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see your introductions. It's a great way to meet people and have some fun during the discussion today. Also, if you have questions for our panel, please put them in the Q&A area just to the left of the chat on the bottom nav. So with us today, as always on Mondays, is Colin Dixon, Chief Analyst and founder of nScreenMedia. Colin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ned. How about you?
I'm doing great. And I think this is, your 26th episode of Let's Do Lunch?
I think he has. I think it is, Ned. And it's been great. I've spoken to such a range of really interesting folks on the show. I've really enjoyed doing it. So I'm 26 is great.
26 in. All right. And who do we have on the show today?
So today we have Sean Doherty. He's CEO and co-founder of Wurl. So Sean, please join us. And I just want to remind folks that we have the third episode of our Psychology of the Subscriber taking place on October 19th. Laura will drop a link into the chat. So if you haven't signed up for that, you need to sign up. That's going to be a great session. We'll be talking about churn and the emotions that go into driving that. Anyway, to get back to today, just a reminder, if you can drop your questions in the Q&A window, I will be keeping a close eye on that. And if I can, as you know, if you've been listening in the past, I will insert the question as we go along. And boy, you're going to have a lot of questions for Sean because Sean really knows the advertising business in streaming extremely well, as you're going to find out this morning as we chat, or as you're going to find out today as we chat. So Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Colin. Good to be here.
And probably a real good place to start because Wurl is a little bit behind the curtain company, right? It's not a brand that everybody would know if they watch streaming video. And we might be real good if you give people a thumbnail of what Wurl does.
Yeah, Wurl is a B2B company, so you're right. We don't have a consumer-facing brand or any services that consumers would see on their TVs or any other devices. So we are a little behind the scenes. We like that. I mean, the business was designed to be that way. We're, what we do is we run a network, and the network, you can think of it as three sides. Video producers, so companies that create content on one side. Streaming services, big, free ad-supported streaming services on the other side. And advertisers are the third kind of leg of the stool. And this network that we run interconnects them all. So a video producer typically would be a customer of ours, like Bloomberg or AMC or A&E. They come to us because they want distribution to streaming services for their ad-supported monetization. And so they plug into our network, sort of an on-ramp where they can deliver their streams and get the streams conditioned and ad markers and all these things put into the streams. And then we arrange all the tech and run the services 24/7 forever for the delivery of these streams to all the different streaming platforms like Roku and Samsung TV Plus and IMDb TV and dozens of others around the world.
So you bring sort of massive syndication without the pain of, well, not syndication, but distribution without the pain of having to integrate with all of those platforms. And that's definitely something that we're going to be getting into in just a little bit. But I've got to start with you where I often start post-March and in these COVID-19 days. Let's talk about growth of use of yours, of the channels that you feed and how that's been really impacting your business over the last several months.
Yeah, we just started doing this about almost 2 years ago now. And you know, it's been kind of a hockey stick of growth that started fairly slow and then sort of picked up. In 2019, it was a lot of early adopters. In 2020, you know, a lot of giant media brands started doing distribution like this, so our business picked up. But when COVID started, you know, I think two things really happened for us. One is that the media, the news media, started covering free ad-supported streaming in more detail because it became an important, you know, it's sort of, they took the veil off, really. The companies that were doing it started sharing data about the scale of the distribution and the scale of the advertising. I think touting it as a important service, I guess, for people that were sheltering at home all over the world. And so that fed the cycle, you know, as more media, what we saw is usage growth, of course, but as more media brands started understanding that this was a real market and that there were, you know, that the numbers were significant, and we saw a lot of customer growth. So a lot of new companies, you know, I think CEOs and heads of distribution started thinking, there's something here. We need to jump on this thing. And so it was, I think it was a combination of those things, more organic usage, you know, so our usage went up. You know, it's hard to attribute what's COVID related and what's just organic growth, but 30 or 40% growth seemed to be, in hours of viewing, seemed to be what was going on at the beginning, first couple of months of COVID, and then it's just continued to grow since then because of the heightened interest, I think.
Right. So in your distribution network are companies like virtual linear providers, AVOD providers, and others. Give us, if you can, talk about some of those distribution partners that you're working with, just to give us an idea of where the content gets to.
Yeah, so these endpoints, you know, where consumers view this content are really in three categories. Smart TV, and I think these are in order of success, really, in order of importance. Smart TVs are really killing it. So Samsung and LG and Vizio, and
it's such a compelling proposition, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's built into the TV. I mean, I had this experience bringing my daughter to college last year, and she wanted a TV for her room, and so we bought the TV, connected it to Wi-Fi, and video started playing. There was no source, there was no app that we had turned on, just video. So it was sort of like video dial tone, you know, that was sort of built into the TV, like an old school TV from 30 or 40 years ago. You turn it on and something starts playing. The same thing happened with this Samsung TV. So, and those smart TV manufacturers, I think, have such an advantage in that everything is integrated right out of the box. You know, connect it to Wi-Fi and you're done. There's no other device to connect, and there's a high percentage of TVs that are now very high connected to Wi-Fi. So that's really the first, you know, I think the set that is producing the most success. If you're a video producer, I would recommend negotiating distribution with the smart TV companies first. They also, you know, there's 200 million or so smart TVs sold every year, so the volume of devices is growing across the world, you know, annually at a very fast pace. So that's the first category. Second category that we distribute to are TV connected devices. So Chromecast, Roku boxes, Amazon Fire devices, all sorts of different devices that are connected to televisions in the United States and in other places in the world. In other parts of the world, it's a different set than typically we have here. But, you know, it's hard to, they don't report numbers for those things, but we're guessing there's 200 million maybe of those devices active around the world now. There's probably 500 or 600 million smart TVs that are internet connected now. And the connected devices during the last couple of years, like Roku and Amazon Fire, have started launching free ad-supported services. So in Roku's case, it's the Roku channel, where they license content and insert ads. In Amazon's case, IMDb TV, and the list goes on. So that's a big second category. Those are, you know, unlike the TV OEMs, the companies that make these connected devices and provide the services, they're internet companies. And so they're more aggressive and, know how to move fast and, you know, extending their services to different places in the world pretty fast. Trying to, I think, their main competitor is probably the smart TV companies. And then the third category, so smart TVs, TV connected devices, third category is apps. So there's lots of great apps that have been deployed on televisions or on these TV connected devices with free ad supported content. Plex is one that we started delivering to recently. Rakuten in Europe and Asia, we've started delivering to recently. Pluto, you know, is on a lot of TVs. Zumo is an app on a lot of TVs. So there's a lot of these apps that have created a version of their app that runs on the TVs, and then they're jockeying for position on the TVs to get to the top level, really. I mean, it's like, this reminds me of, you know, like search results almost. It's like if you're on the first page, it's such a difference for an app than if you're not. I mean, it's kind of like all or nothing, frankly. And so a lot of the app developers are doing deals with the TV manufacturers to get a button on the remote or to get placement on the first page, and that's, you know, beachfront property. So it's a very active set of negotiations, country by country, really, for placement on these TV interfaces.
So is it primarily the virtual linear opportunities, the things like Samsung TV Plus, and you mentioned Roku, you mentioned Pluto TV and Zumo, etc. Is it primarily virtual linear, these constructed linear channels that you're focused on? It is.
Hours of viewing, you know, 95+% of the viewing is these virtual linear channels, and we deliver on-demand assets and linear channels to just about every platform that we go to, but consumers prefer these linear channels, which is, I think, for a lot of people seems counterintuitive, but when you think about it, the simplicity of the kind of discovery metaphor on these and behavior on these for virtual linear channels, I think draws a lot of usage.
It seems to me that the viewing behavior of consumers with SVOD services and with these virtual linear channels is pretty different, right? They're sort of in different viewing modes, wouldn't you say? It seems to me that with the virtual linear channels, that they're things that they just sort of put on and let play.
Yeah, not only that, but like my example about my daughter, when they turn the TV on, in a lot of cases, the interfaces have been designed to have the power-up experience start video playing. And it's very, I don't know what the right word is. It's, you know, from a kind of user experience on an SVOD application like Netflix or something like that, you're forced to make decisions, right? So you sign in, you choose your name, and then you get, you know, the cover art and swim lanes of cover art where you have to search and, you know, make a decision. On these virtual linear services, in many cases, because video starts playing, you have to make a decision to stop, not to start. And there's something, you know, I heard a story, I don't know if this is true, that before Roku started the Roku channel, they had, I think it was CBS, had a Roku app that they ran on the Roku platform back when it was just apps. And CBS had done this clever, it's news, so they had done this clever thing that kind of was outside of the normal framework of the Roku apps, where when you launched the CBS app on Roku, video started playing. There was no cover art, there was no decisions to make. You were just like, boom, you're right in the news. And they noticed that the session time on the CBS News experience app was significantly higher, many, many times higher, order of magnitudes higher than any other app that they had on the platform. And it was just this human behavior thing where you launch the app, and if you don't have to make more decisions, you're in it, you start watching, and it's hard to stop. You know, and with news, a different news story is coming up. With, you know, movies, lots of times we've noticed this behavior where people will be channel surfing on these platforms and they'll join some movie 20 minutes into the movie. They haven't seen the beginning, but they just keep watching. and there's something about us, in the way that we consume content where I think for, more than half of viewing, that's the experience that people want. They want to watch TV. They don't have some particular decision that they want to make.
Yeah, it's happened to me several times.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get in. So talk to us a little bit about the channels that you help construct. Are they so you work with a content provider and you help them put together program channels.
Yeah.
So talk to us about some of those types of opportunities, how you work with those partners.
Yeah, the companies that we work with are digital first kinds of studios like Tastemade and Cheddar and Jukin and all these kind of, I think John Steinberg from Cheddar calls it the new cable networks or post-cable networks or something like that. So it's these digital first companies that are very aggressive about this because they don't have other distribution on cable or something. The second category are cable and broadcast networks, so A&E, AMC, Bloomberg, et cetera, as I mentioned before, that are switching or adding, let's say, streaming linear channel distribution to their traditional model, which has been distribution of channels through cable. And then the third category are big television and movie studios that have enormous catalogs of content that they would previously license for television distribution. They would license to cable and broadcast networks, but now they're disintermediating those cable and broadcast networks and building their own channels, so-called, for distribution directly to these streaming platforms. Sony is a customer of ours that is in that category. Banijay, used to be called Endemol, is another one that, that they told us, I think, that they've got 70,000 assets in their catalog that, they would license to Netflix and, television networks and things like that in the past, which they still do, but now they've got on our platform, I don't know, maybe like 15 channels that they distribute to different countries around the world.
Yeah. Steve LeBlanc, thank you for reminding people to put their question into the Q&A, because Steve's dropped in an interesting question, Sean, that I think is pretty appropriate for us to deal with now. He says, what's your take on program-specific channels on platforms like Pluto, such as Deal or No Deal channel and the Norman Lear channel, where they often run a single episode over a 24-hour period? Have you seen cumulative metrics that suggest that this virtual binge destination strategy is as successful as a broader content strategy?
In many cases, more successful. I was going to mention that before. So Deal or No Deal is a good example. It's not a single episode, but it's a single series.
Right, Endemol Shine, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That Endemol in that case would put out. There's some others coming that I can't talk about, but are some pretty cool things. We do a lot of distribution with Twitch for their marathons, which are essentially the same thing. Every episode of Mr. Rogers that was ever created, or Doctor Who, we did a Doctor Who marathon for them, or Pokemon, we did like every Pokemon cartoon over the course of 3 months in 6 countries with them. They're very popular, those things. And I think, it's a sort of binge mentality where people, they don't necessarily want every half hour, every hour, as on traditional TV, to start watching something different. We've been kind of conditioned with binge capabilities on SVOD platforms to watch episode after episode, and the services are just teeing it up. And it's interesting, the behavior on these free ad-supported services for those kinds of marathon, or whatever you want to call it, channels, is people just sort of drop in and drop out. It's not on the half hour or something like that. They'll tune into the channel in the middle of something, Deal or No Deal or something, and they end up staying for 40 or 50 minutes on average, watching 1 or 2 or parts of 1 or 2 episodes, and then kind of dip back out again. So it's interesting, the new entrants to this. Well, even traditional companies like cable and broadcast networks that have big catalogs of 13 seasons of, some show can do this because they have the content, so they can curate these things and create it. And we've removed the, I mean, cable TV was like defined by its constraints, right? Limited number of channels. If you're AMC or you're A&E or whoever, you've got one channel. That's it. You've got to program it and try to appeal to the maximum possible audience. There's no constraint on the number of channels on streaming. And so there's the potential for everyone can have a channel, you know, or every show could have a channel. I'm not suggesting that, but the constraint, that kind of channel frequency constraint that's a legacy of traditional TV from 80 years ago is gone now. And so lots of experimenting. Different things work in different places in the world too. You know, it's different kinds of content, but these marathon channels seem to be universally popular.
Yeah. So you mentioned something interesting earlier, something that I've thought about a lot. Normally, you know, up until now, the way you got into OTT streaming was you launched an app and you got that up and running, you began to develop an audience, and then you started looking at distribution options. Is it necessary for people to have an O&O app to be successful now in streaming?
No, it's not. In fact, I would, for most people, discourage it. It's, you know, maybe it's a part of the puzzle, but it's incredibly difficult to acquire and retain viewers for an app, especially a subscription-based app with niche content or a limited catalog of content. I mean, if you're a giant like Disney or Hulu or Netflix or maybe HBO Max or a few others, you can pull it off. Big catalog, lots of choice, that kind of thing. And there's room for, I don't know what the number is, 3 to 10 of those, I think, you know, in the United States and maybe in each country. But if you don't have the size or diversity of catalog that those giants have, you know, including originals, it's just really difficult to develop any kind of a meaningful business around direct-to-consumer apps. The interesting thing, though, about what's happened with these free ad-supported linear services and VOD is, you and I have talked about this before, they give all of the data benefits, the same level of data as a direct-to-consumer app. So you've got IP and you know what every viewer is doing at every moment. You know, in many cases, the video producer using services like ours is actually streaming directly to the devices, everybody's device in their home, of their own content. So like on Samsung TV Plus, I don't know, there's like 150 channels now. There's 150 different companies that are streaming those channels to that TV. The Samsung interface is really just for navigation to connect to a stream that Wurl or Pluto or somebody else is actually delivering to those TVs. And most of these services work the same way. So that's it's a challenge for the video producers, the content companies, to put the tech in place. That's the problem we solve. But the benefit, the data benefit that they get from having that direct data relationship with every viewer around the world is enormous. Driving their programming, advertising, all those things that they would do in a direct-to-consumer app of their own.
And you know, the great thing about the Wurl network is that partners get to benefit in your unified ad platform as well. So talk to us a little bit about how that unified ad platform works.
Yeah, about a year ago, we saw that this is, you know, with this kind of direct-to-consumer model, that the video producers were streaming their own content with us and others all the way to consumers. These linear channels had ad markers in them, so they had, you know, maybe 8 to 10 minutes of advertising every hour that needed to get filled and could be filled in an individually targeted basis in real time. So that's enormously valuable. But you have to sell the advertising. You know, you need an ad sales team and an ad tech and an ad stack, you know, fairly sophisticated on TV to do that. There's lots of idiosyncrasies of this kind of streaming TV delivery that make it more difficult even than VOD ad insertion. So anyway, our customers weren't filling at the rate that they wanted to. You know, they're filling 18, 20, 25% of the ads, but the rest, it was just Slate or some promos or something that were being displayed. So we figured we needed to help them. And so we created a free service for anyone that uses our network called AdPool. And AdPool initially was basically a backfill service. So if the video producer, say A&E, wasn't filling all of their inventory, which no one fills 100%, they could route the unfilled inventory in real time. This is all happening in seconds to our AdPool service, and we would then attempt to fill it on their behalf, stitch the ad into the stream, and send 100% of the revenue to, in this example, A&E. That has become enormously successful. We didn't really anticipate this, but what happened was, as it became more successful, there's kind of a flywheel, because more and more inventory was going into AdPool. This is during the last, I think it's about a year ago, we launched it. So more and more ad inventory was going in there. The scale was growing, which made it more popular with advertisers. They could get the ad fill that they were looking for. And that then accelerated the interest in AdPool by the video producers. So it just sort of, this kind of back and forth fed off itself, and it's now become a really important part of the service that we provide to our customers. And in most cases, our customers who are using AdPool are generating more revenue from AdPool than they pay us for our services.
So
it's, our services end up costing them nothing. In many cases, we're paying them lots of money every month for the advertising that we help them sell.
Yeah. Just a reminder, I think, Roger, you typed your question into the chat box. Please put it in the Q&A window. I won't see it in the chat box. Let's talk about sales of those ads. How is that done? Is that mostly done through programmatic, or is there some direct relationships? And how are the ads typically targeted?
Yeah, so the way that they're sold is, there's kind of three different ways that the video producers who are and the streaming services are all selling the advertising. Maybe I should back up. The typical situation for streaming services that the inventory is split in some percentage, where say 30% of the inventory the streaming service gets all the ad requests and they can sell it, and then 70% of the inventory the video producer, the content company, gets to sell. So they work that out ahead of time, and there's a contract that memorializes that. Wurl then is responsible for doing the splitting. So in real time, we're doing the math constantly on each channel. We know what the percentages are supposed to be for the splits, and we route the ad requests to whoever is selling. What's happening in the selling is, for the streaming services and the video producers, they're selling in one of three ways. Upfronts. So there's not a lot of that yet, but it's growing, months in advance of selling going on in upfront like structures. That's growing. The second thing that they do is direct selling. So the video producers are each talking to agencies and other kinds of intermediaries, and maybe weeks before ads will air, getting campaigns and negotiating the terms of that. And then I'd say that's maybe a third across our network of the way that ads are being sold. And then close to 2/3 of it is programmatic. And the programmatic is, all this kind of second to second, no humans involved, server to server selling that's going on, mostly with SSPs. So SpotX and Teleria and Zumo and others that are SSPs that focus on connected TV, and then increasingly direct connections to DSPs, the buy side programmatic networks, where companies that have enough scale can arrange direct connections to those and bypass the SSPs and the fees that the SSPs collect.
Very good. So I'm gonna ask one more question of you, and then we're just going to go to the Q&A. Sean, I've not seen this many questions. It's just also a lot of questions people have for you, so I want to get to those real quick. But my last question to you is really about ad innovation. are we really still in the days where we're just talking about, you know, a pretty standard interstitial ad, or where the ad's placed in a pod and away we go? Or are we seeing any newer functionality like interactive ads, hero ads, where, you know, they sponsor the whole streaming session?
Yeah.
Talk to us about ad innovation in this but in your space that you're seeing.
Yeah. So on the different kinds of ad form factor, I'll say there's some innovation going on. So there are a couple of companies. Innovid is one that does this on Roku and some other platforms, and Triple Lift does this on some other platforms. There's different kinds of form factors like squeeze backs and bottom thirds and things like that that are becoming increasingly popular on TV. I don't know if anyone watched football over the weekend, but there's this kind of thing that started a year or two ago with, you know, during a timeout, for example, they'll move the television video into a smaller window and then play an ad beside it without really switching away from the football game. They do the same thing with baseball now too.
Right.
So there's different form factors that are coming around with streaming. Overlays are another thing that we've done a lot of work with, where, you know, without interrupting the viewing, you can put a little animated ad down in the bottom of the screen for whatever it is, you know, Doritos during a sporting event or something like that. And it's a way, those things are all ways to get more ad load into a unit of viewing time, an hour of viewing time, without it irritating the viewers too much, right? It can go overboard, but, you know, they try to have a light hand with those things. So different form factors, those things are starting now, and I think will become more popular as time goes on. And then the other more technical stuff that's going on with connected TV is there's some really unique problems that need to be solved with ad pods and, you know, multi-ad pods that we become accustomed to on traditional TV, and getting those filled properly with programmatic. There's most of the server technology, ad server technology out there is unsuited to that. You can't, you know, you kind of make a request from the server for some ads, and you've got a 3-ad pod and you get 2 ads back, and that's it. You can't, there's no opportunity to sort of retry and fill the 3rd pod. There's some companies out there that are doing quite a good job of that podded response. SpringServe is one that we work with a lot, that SpotX has just bought an interest in.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of innovation around that. And then there's a lot of complexity with, believe it or not, channel changing on these, channel surfing on these interfaces. You know, these companies like Pluto and IMDb TV and others have created this electronic program guide, the old grid format, and channel up down kind of discovery interfaces. And those things create havoc with ads, because if you're, you know, say you're going channel up rapidly, as people do, and you hit an ad break, and the ad network goes to get an ad, and then you've channeled up before the ad can come back, you know, in that half a second or a second. So accounting for all of that and making that stuff work is a new challenge that for VOD and things like that, people don't have the same problem. There's also a scale issue. You know, these channels are globally distributed. You know, there can be millions of people watching at the same time. So it's all the live sports problems that ad insertion companies dealt with a few years ago, where, you know, you're trying to serve an individually targeted ad to millions of people at exactly the same moment.
So yeah, there's some scale. Boy, I hadn't even thought about that channel change issue with regard to the ad pods. And
we hadn't either.
What a bear of a problem to have to deal with.
We couldn't even figure it out. It's like, you know, why is we're getting ads back, but 20% of the time or 15% of the time or something, there's no ad, the ad doesn't get played. What are people doing? And then we kind of started thinking about it.
Figured it out.
Yeah, figured out that like 12% of the time that's happening.
Yeah. So Laura, can we go ahead and put the poll up? Because Sean and I, we've got a lot of questions here to get through. So while Sean and I continue to chat, please fill out the poll questions. And by the way, just to clarify the questions, I'm really thinking about the US market here, not international markets. So if you can answer them from the point of view of the domestic market rather than the international. Ron Neidham, you partially asked his question, but he asked about ad pod structures, shorter inventory durations, ad forgiveness. We talked about interactive ads. Let's talk about ad pod structures. Are those things cast in stone, or are they flexible with the partners that you work with?
You mean like the duration of the ad pod?
Duration, frequency. Can you vary those things?
Yeah, in fact, in most cases, the platform will give guidance about what they want the video producers to do. 8 minutes max per hour or something like that. But it's up to in every case I'm aware of, it's up to the video producer themselves to determine the duration of the ad breaks, the frequency, and the placement. And so they're, within the constraints, the rules that the streaming platform gives them, when video producers create these channels, they're determining when the ad breaks are. There's some services that don't do that. Pluto, for example, makes all these decisions on behalf of the video producers, but most, our customers are deciding how many ads they want and what's the duration, and it's really for different content. It's different ad pod durations make more sense. Like with news, you can have frequent short pods because people, in sports even, people are accustomed to that sort of rhythm of the programming accommodating those breaks. In a movie, you don't want to do that. You're trying to squeeze in your 8 minutes and be very careful about where you put it and make sure that people don't tune in.
Yeah, I was talking to Tubi last week, and they said that they optimize on the fly. So based on that particular viewer, what they're doing, how much they're viewing, what type of content, and they can vary those on the fly. So it's interesting, your comments on the news.
Well, with VOD, you can do that because you don't, it's like on linear, you've got a fixed start and stop time for a linear channel, right? And so you can move it around a little bit, but you've got to make sure you get your full 8 minutes in, or there's going to be blank air, if you have too few ads at the end of the show or a big bundle of events. So it's trickier with scheduled linear channels to get it just right.
So Roger Jackson wants to know, oh boy, this could be a big question, but maybe you can just give us a thumbnail. He says, how do the content providers actually get their channel accepted by Samsung or LG? How does that, just give us a rough idea of what that process is like.
Yeah, I'll give you the BD guy's phone number. You ready? No, it's direct licensing deals between each platform and each video producer. They all do it individually. So, you have to contact them. If somebody wants, email me or whatever if you want, and I can get you in touch with the right people at whatever platform it is that you're interested in.
Very good. So maybe you can follow up, Roger, in the chat window, and Laura will connect you with Sean. Michelle Schott, she had a couple of questions about the O&O apps, and I'll read her second question. Would direct-to-consumer apps offer independent creators with market control of their catalog a viable means of distribution with the protection of their IP? If not, why not? So this sort of goes back to our discussion about O&O apps and the advantages of doing that. And maybe I guess she's asking if there are other advantages to doing O&O apps vis-a-vis more control, etc., that might weigh more heavily in its favor.
Yeah, I don't think control of control of IP and DRM and things like that are any lesser with these aggregated streaming platforms like TV Plus and Roku channel and others. They're secure, and you have full control as a content company of your IP. The difference really is in a direct-to-consumer app, it's all your brand. It's like AMC has Shudder. I saw some stats about it last week. It's a pretty successful, I think, horror movies and things app, and it's their brand, it's their app, they're in the App Store, they're on all these different devices. although they control the navigation in their app. They're of course not competing for, you know, share of viewing with other streaming content because it's entirely their content. Those are the benefits. It's a silo, and you get all the benefit control and, you know, usage benefits of the silo. I personally think that, you know, it's in the math that we look at is that it's far more lucrative to have your content become part of one of these aggregated streaming services that are aggregating audience. So, you know, you get your silo if you've got your own app, but you're going to, you know, get, I forget what Shudder announced, 1 million or 2 million subscribers. You know, these streaming platforms on connected devices and smart TVs are now in 400 million homes.
Yeah.
Like that. So it's, you know.
I got a great question here from Gitanjali Dylan. He asks, what is your thinking of the opportunity in the Hispanic space for an SVOD or AVOD play? Seems there is an opportunity for one player to own this space.
For SVOD or AVOD?
Maybe we should, we'll shove the SVOD part aside a little bit. Let's just talk about the AVOD opportunity for Hispanic.
Yeah. So we're, you know, on free ad-supported linear channels, we're actually launching 2 Spanish language channels tomorrow, I think, on Roku, from a very, I don't think I can say who, I'm not sure, but a very big multinational media brand. We need more. In the United States, we need more Spanish language and other language content. Most of these services are dominated by English language content. So I think there's lots of opportunity there. I'd love to see more of that. You know, in the app, I couldn't really comment on the direct-to-consumer apps. I really don't. We don't work very much in that market.
Right. So we'll take one more question. And Gitanjali, I'm so sorry. she tells me that she's a she, not a he. So my apologies, Gitanjali. So last question, Mark Patterson asks, are app licensing agreements with the likes of Roku or smart TV manufacturers typically structured as a revenue share model?
I think the majority are inventory share, but only a slight majority. So it's either inventory share or rev share. And frankly, most of them are, the streaming platforms are flexible about that. If a video producer wants to sell their own inventory, in most cases, the streaming platform will allow that and share 50, 60, 70%, maybe more of the inventory with them as part of the deal. We like those deals because they're just very simple. There's no money that's changing hands between the platform and the video producer. They're just each getting inventory, and, you know, it's like, go ahead, go sell it, and that's how they're each going to make whatever revenues and profits they generate from it.
Right, right. Okay, so let's take a look at the panel questions. Thank you, Laura. She's just taken them down. And actually, before we talk about the panel questions, I just had an idea, and there've been so many great questions, Sean. And I want to ask the audience, let me know if you think that we should do an AVOD roundtable where I'll grab a couple of people, smart people like Sean, and you can send in questions beforehand, and I'll make the session totally generated, totally driven by your questions, not mine. And Steve LeBlanc likes that idea a lot. So if you agree with him, put it on the chat, and I'll chat with Ned afterwards and see if we can put that together. Because boy, this has been such an interesting session, Sean. Okay, so let's take a quick look. Which platforms offer the most revenue opportunity for content owners? Well, it seems pretty evenly distributed. I'm surprised so many people said YouTube. I consider YouTube, well, I don't know. Is YouTube a great platform to earn revenue on? Better than a virtual linear like Pluto TV, Sean? What do you think?
I don't know, Colin. I mean, we don't, YouTube doesn't have the kind of model that we serve. I mean, YouTube.com, I think we're talking about that, not YouTube. So, you know, I mean, it's got enormous scale. I think that's the trade-off. These virtual linear channels don't yet have the kind of scale that YouTube does.
In 5 years, what will be the ratio of ad-supported to ad-free viewing for the average TV viewer? And as I said, in the US, and it looks like Wow. It looks like most people seem to be sat in the middle, 50, 50, 60, 40, either side seems to be the most popular option there, Sean. So what I'm taking away from that is this is really good news for Wurl, because right now I have a feeling it's probably more heavily weighted towards SVOD. But that's not where people think it's
SVOD
going.
or hybrid, like Hulu and some other services that are both subscription-based and ad-based. I think that's true. I think if you ask this question outside of the US, you'd see it flipped. It's going to be, I think the first one, 80% or higher ad-supported. Yeah. Actually, that's not really, it's the last one, isn't it?
It's the last one, which got like 0 votes,
Yeah.
Yeah. And my last question, do you think that Netflix will introduce an ad-supported tier of service? And well, most people don't think. 38% say no, never. There's at least 50% of folks seem to think that within 5 years it's going to happen. So what do you think? You think they're going to do it? Sean?
I think they would not in the United States. I think there's a chance that they would do it in other countries where it makes more sense the way that people consume and pay for content there, and it's frankly a way to compete with some very, very large providers, especially in Asia, that are eating Netflix lunch, are 5, 10, 20 times bigger than Netflix.
All right. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation, Sean. Thank you so much. And I think maybe we won't do it next week, but maybe we'll see if we can do it the week after. Let me see. I'll chat with Ned, and I'll let the audience know. So Ned, we could talk about this offline, but
I love the idea. It sounds like a great one. Let's do it. Sean, thank you for a great session today, and Colin, as always. Folks, tomorrow we will be back, and we have a program tomorrow that's focused on the entertainment industry and the upcoming election. So I'm sure that's front of mind for a lot of people. So join us tomorrow at noon Pacific. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.